COVID is just the beginning of a longer process in society.
There is no way that we get to have the America that we want with power over cohesion.
I just wanted to bring all voices to the table, whatever they had to say.
And if following my integrity gets me out of here, I'm following my integrity.
2 words, safe and effective.
Safe and effective. Oh.
We are going to have to turn up the volume on love.
Was trying to tell you, don't do this. They're lying. And they didn't believe us. I forgive them.
Needing to self-censor. When at university, the other professors would come up and say, look, I'm with you on this, but I don't dare say anything.
And I had people going, oh, you're one of those.
You're not really listening unless you're willing to be changed by another.
In trying to control the virus and get it under control, we were trying to control people.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I can't sit down and do this, so it feels weird, so I have to stand up for a moment. My name is Allison Baker, and I am the co-founder of the Human Universal Health Institute, and we co-founded this, my beloved Dr. John Augsburger and I. And BioLogic was born out of this desire for education and advocacy. And when we first started the Institute, the person who was the medical director said to us, hey, let's do some not-for-profit education. And we're like, yeah, that sounds great. And for the last 12 years, we've had this not-for-profit, and now is the season of true education and conversation. There has never been a riper time to bring humans together and to have living conversations offline and in person. And this impulse really only comes to us now because Phil Silberman showed up one day and said, hey, let's have a no party party because we lost our party when that went that way and that went that way. And I was like, okay, let's have a party. But little by little we realized, wait, what are we partying about? Because the climate wasn't exactly one of party just yet. There's a lot of, I don't know who to affiliate with, I don't know where to turn my attention. And so we decided we would bring back Let's Talk About It. Let's Talk About It was born about 7 years ago. The first one was called Suicide and Depression. And we invited people to the table from whoever you are, show up. And the second one was trauma, addiction, and the opioid crisis, because there was so much of that as well. And so here we are today, one of the hottest topics around. Let's talk about vaccines. And so we are so grateful for all of you coming and joining this conversation. And I'll let Phil please introduce Theo and also yourself. I know you because you walked in and said, come on, let's go. And I said, okay.
Yeah, so Allison and John hosted a wonderful event here with Children's Health Defense a few months ago. And I had this idea to gather people together around Bobby Kennedy's confirmation of being Secretary of HHS. And immediately they just said, well, let's talk about it. I came over here, we met for like 4 hours and just talked and shared, and tonight is the result of that conversation. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for years, of like bringing people together and just talking about it. I've been many times, many of you I know, from going to the Capitol and testifying for or against bills. And the environment is always one of animosity and nobody really wanting to listen, and people wanting so much to speak but not having really the ability or the openness of people to do that. And so I wanted to make something happen, or to see if something could happen. I was tired of making things happen. I was like, let's just see if something will happen. And this is happening, and I'm so grateful for each one of you being here, because it wouldn't be happening if you weren't here. So I'd like to introduce my good friend Theo Wilson, it's really interesting because Allison's thing is called Let's Talk About It. Theo has an organization called Shop Talk Live, because in the Black community, barbershops have been a traditional place of meeting, of gathering, and talking about it. And so he's facilitated some really amazing conversations, bringing together, for example, the Black community and the Jewish community, and talking about anti-Semitism and racism, things of that sort. And Theo was he was involved in the Bobby Kennedy campaign for president for a year and a half as the advisor for African American issues, directly to Kennedy. And now he's back fresh from a visit to Ghana and doing some work there. And he will be facilitating tonight's event. So my good friend Theo Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. One more thing. I need 2 volunteers. If anybody is willing to take notes and provide us with feedback, critique, your observations of the evening at the end of the evening. Do I have any volunteers to do that?
I liked it first when he said any volunteers, and everybody was like, wait, what's he going to ask?
Just to take notes, and then just to provide what was your experience at the end of the evening?
Just one.
All right, and you even have a notebook.
I do.
All right, you are prepared. And Rose, will you do it?
Right.
I volunteered my wife.
So, now you're going to be a team.
Perfect.
Unless somebody else really wants to. I don't want to take somebody's urge to do it. Okay. I'll fill in. I don't either. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, with that, my friend Theo Wilson.
Thank you all for being here. Can we give it up for Allison and Phil real quick? So I just want to lay down a couple of structural rules that'll help things go in a productive direction. Because, we're just going to talk about the light stuff here today, not heavy, right?
That's right.
Right. And there's no passions about this. So, because we want folks to have a productive experience, when you get your chance to talk, or if you want to talk, just like raise your hand. Phil's walking around to be my eyes where I can't see, all right? So do we agree to raise our hand if we have something to say?
Yes.
Great. Do we agree to keep our comments to 2 minutes and under? Is there anybody who can't keep their comment? You just can't do it.
Charlie
All right, cool.
It's 2 minutes, 10 seconds.
All right, 2 minutes, 10 seconds. You get a 10-second grace period. And finally, do we agree that if there's a conflict, to come at the idea and not the person?
I like that.
Yeah.
Ideas can change. If somebody is open to evolving, if somebody is open to growing, then there's going to be a change of ideas. Anybody in here ever changed their mind? Mm-hmm. All right, cool. And then finally, I would just ask for respect. Like if somebody's talking, side conversations in a room this quiet can be picked up, and you will be recorded on the microphone. So, you may end up on camera. If you don't want to, end up in a recording. Tell these good folks, and they'll blur you out. So, with that being said, I want everybody to just take a deep breath. Just ground yourself. Ground yourself. Let's take one more. And I'm going to do a thought exercise with you. There's 2 sets of goggles that we can view the world through. One of them I call duality goggles, and the other one I call unity goggles. Both sets of goggles see the exact same data, but they arrange them in a different way. Duality goggles are adept at picking out what's different. They are adept at finding the divisions. They're good at it. And it's real data, right? There's no lies there. It's really good at figuring out what's wrong with them. Unity goggles see the exact same data, but they connect the points differently in a way that sees commonality, in a way that sees where we are unified and have common ground. I would hope that we could pick up some Unity goggles today. Try it out. And in order to start this off, Allison had a great idea. I'm gonna play a short game called Pin the Tail on the Bias. We're gonna start like this. By show of hands, only voluntarily if you want to. How many would say that they are on the vaccine advocacy side? Okay. By show of hands, how many would say they're probably on the vaccine hesitancy side? So I know who I have in the room with me today. Certainly. Well, listen, I want to say that our life experiences create the sum of the data that we end up landing at most of the time, right? And none of us can control where we were set forth in this world, and that's just where we landed, all right? And so what I want to do is I'm going to take you through a story that begins at COVID, and then I want to get your opinions on your experience. I remember COVID energetically. It reminded me of right after 9/11, where the atmosphere was rife with fear. And I had gotten a little wary about an atmosphere rife with fear because I was in college when the War on Terror began. And I remember that when fear is afoot, sometimes people make decisions they would not have made otherwise. And I found myself with a baby being born. My wife gave birth to our oldest daughter 2 weeks before they locked the world down. Now look, I'm a public speaker. I had set up all of these engagements because I knew as a father I need to provide. Turns out you can't be a public speaker if ain't no public. Fear. Next thing, I got a following at the time of 100,000 people. I don't know what I can and can't influence. So I start trying to yell at people to not be afraid. Stop being scared. Right? I found myself at my mother's house. Right? You know, my wife's taking care of the baby. She's taking a nap. I went to go see my mother. And Lester Holt is on the news. And I swear to goodness, I have a trauma reaction every time I hear the man say, tonight. Tonight. Dun, 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 dun. I'm like, ah, right? I promise you, those first days of lockdown on the news cycle, that's all you heard. And if you were to take a blood test of my cortisol, before that TV came on, and after that cycle of the news went off, you'd have seen elevated levels. Well, I know that this can make you more vulnerable to viruses. So I get on my megaphone and be like, stop being afraid. And of course, people are like, how can you tell me to do that, right? But I remember COVID as an energetic fear.
Yeah.
That's what I remember most. Maybe about 4 or 5 people. Tell me, by show of hand, what is your memory of COVID in under 2 minutes? Your first memory of COVID. Your first memory and experience of COVID. What was yours?
I did a shamanic journey because I could feel it coming energetically
Right.
in 2019.
Goodness
And I
gracious.
got revealed what was coming down. And I started sharing with people. There's a story, I think it comes from Sufism, There's a wise man standing under a tree, and down the hill comes a specter of pestilence, spirit. And he asked the spirit, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going down to the village to kill 100 people." And then the spirit comes back up the hill, and the wise man say, "Stop, I saw 1,000 people died, and you told me you were only going to kill 100. And he said, "I did only kill 100, the rest died of fear."
That is very powerful.
And, yeah, that's where I stood with it, yeah. So would you.
She remembers fear.
Yeah.
What do you remember, your first real impression of COVID?
Honestly, I went to my doctor and she said, "Dr. Fauci is corrupt." And that was in like February of 2019.
Goodness
she
gracious.
said, "I'm not worried about you. If you get it, you'll do fine." And then I just remember I was able to keep my job because we were considered a necessary thing. So I didn't have that fear that you would have of losing your business, your income. And I just remember how eerie it was to drive through the city and nobody else on roads that usually were packed with people. And just that kind of creepy feeling. But initially, I don't remember having a lot of jarring experience with it. It was just over time that I kind of waffled in and out of fear. And my friend is a gifted homeopath, and the homeopath had already figured out how to get some of the virus and make a homeopathic remedy, so she gave me some of that. And so that made me feel a little bit more comfortable. It's a very complex thing, but my mother just died last year at 97, so she was very elderly through it. So that was always a worry, always a worry. And so I wasn't worried about me, although every now and then I freak out, but it was more like, it was disgusting and heartbreaking to watch people die in the hospital by themselves. And I said, I don't care if I get it, my mother is not going to die in the hospital by herself. That's just not going to happen. So you can see, that's where my trigger point was. It's like Mama Bear mode. It's like my mother's not dying by herself.
Absolutely. Care. I hear care and concern, right? And protective instinct. Thank you. Can I get like two more people? What is your first impression that you can recall of the COVID phenomenon? Beth, what's up?
I think for me, like the first few weeks of shutdown was mainly grief. My daughter was a freshman in high school, and she was in musical theater, and they were doing the musical, and they were a week from, the performances. And it was like, and like all the kids still had some hope of like, it's okay, because they said 2 weeks and we'll be back and we'll just postpone. And I just knew deep down, like, this is gonna be a lot longer than 2 weeks. And touching that now, like I feel pretty angry about the disruption to her life and to normalcy. And yeah, it was huge.
And how it affected kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I remember feeling so worried about babies because I happen to know a lot about development, and seeing faces is so important. And so when everybody was going on about masks, and I was like, I think this is a really bad idea. And yet I had a lot of fear around speaking that truth.
Absolutely. The entire weight of a society's fear is a difficult thing for an individual to bear. Anybody else? First impressions, sir.
Sadness, suspicion. I'm old enough to remember a television commercial when I was a kid. It was an Indian chief who had a tear coming down his face. Remember that?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yeah.
And it had to do with just what happened to the land and the earth. And the sadness came from the trajectory that humanity has chosen, and humanity's relationship to Mother Earth. And viruses have been around for so much longer than we have. And so have bacteria, and so have molds. And through the evolution of cell biology, we're here to this moment, right? And what happened? Like, how far back does this go? So this is my suspicion. And now I'm a biological dentist. So I see them, I see the body a little differently. I see the mouth differently than just being a tooth mechanic. So, and I look at the healthcare, I call it disease care. I don't call it healthcare. I call it disease care. And just how doctors and so-called healthcare and the trajectory that's been on, and the Newtonian approach of top-down doctor-patient, and we do these things to you, and it's called standard of care, as opposed to living in symbiosis with our fellow humans and our fellow and our planet. And what happened? What? We've lived with viruses forever since, and now this. So that's where that came.
Understood. So from the scientific perspective, we've been through this before. Why is this now such a thing that we have to give away our human interaction? Now, as it went on, I remember as a social media quote-unquote influencer, that's what they call people these days who have like a platform. He's an influencer. Okay. You say so. I remember the thing that got me my following, if you will, they don't want to follow me nowhere, right, was the fact that I had a piercing discernment of situations in popular consciousness. But then I remember that gift turning against me. And that the way in which I was articulating my perception of the situation was out of sync with the masses of folks who, like me, had generally left-leaning politics. And I remember the conflict, the human conflict. One of my first memories of the human conflict was when somebody who I had known for years accused me of being a follower of a certain individual who I did not particularly care for, who was president in the year of our Lord 2020. Now that I don't know what your politics are, I'm just telling you, I'm doing I statements here. I'm like, you know me. You know where I stand. How could you think that I had taken that side politically when all I'm trying to say is there's something we are missing? We are missing something. And I don't want to give any moral high ground away because it was an election year, if you remember. And so I said to myself, how deep is this division going to go? Right? Because there was a series of what felt like, to me, I statement, me, removals of freedom. Felt like it. And the first one would just keep me in my house. You know, I'm an extrovert. I like people. Right? And I remember people were like, no, shelter in place. And I was like, no, I want to go outside. And that was when conflict with other human beings, I remember, people who I thought like I was good with, showed up in opposition of what I thought were my gifts. What was your first instance of knowing that this could lead to social strife? Allison was first. I see you back there. Allison was first.
No, please. Was someone else?
You go.
All right. Social strife. Well, this thing called the lockdown and being in a healthcare facility with a dentist and open mouths, right? And providing medical procedures on people because we were essential personnel. So we could get a little bit, but we couldn't go all in. And so what I started to notice is like, wait, who do I relate to? Because it seemed everywhere we turned, we were on the wrong side of the conversation. I was either going too far by staying open and providing services, or we needed to protect the people who were here, or they were going to call us in and report us. And if we were identified as people who didn't get vaccinated, then that was a whole nother conversation. And so social strife for us during that time was just duck, cover, and how long is this going to last? And it was a long time. And then the last thing in my 1 second left is what was right and what was left got so confusing. I used to say the right and the left are so close, they're touching butts. They don't even know it. If they would turn around and look at each other, they would realize, wait, who are you? A lot of disassociation of familiar relationship and not knowing who was a friend and who was a foe, because anybody could turn you in just like that if you were a brick and mortar business.
Absolutely. What stakes? Look at those stakes. Thank you, Allison. Who else has some memories of when the social strife became very apparent?
So my story is similar to Allison in that I'm also I have a small suite chiropractic practice, and it was handed down from the Department of Regulatory Agencies at the state level that we were not allowed to practice because we could only do critical and essential care. And so my colleagues all around me just shut their doors. And I decided that if I could keep someone out of their medical doctor's office, or if I could keep a medical professional on the job, and I do a lot of prenatal work, if I could help a person have an out-of-hospital birth, that seemed pretty critical to me. So I cut back my hours. I let my patients know that, we can't just be doing business as usual, but I will be open, and you can come in if you need to. And I got a lot of strife from colleagues and other healthcare people who I thought were really alternative minded, but ended up being just really so scared about themselves and their future that they just couldn't see their way clear to do any of that work. In fact, somebody got a hold of the acupuncturist that share my office space and told them that they had to remove all of the artwork off the walls and pull up all the carpets from the floor because that's where this virus was going to hide and get them. And so it was crazy at my building for a long, long time. And I just worked through it because my practice is so small. I didn't have the sort of resources to shut down and just not go to work. And if I could have found a way to adjust people online, I might have tried that, but that's not really a thing.
That's not a thing. Thank you very much. The social strife showed up and people having fears that seemed out of touch with reality and wanting you to bend to them, of all things. My friend, go ahead. The moment you knew there was social strife.
So mine was within my own family, which I'm sure a lot of people have the same thing go on. My husband and I didn't see eye to eye. We've gotten past it, so I guess I won't give specific examples. Don't want to throw them under the bus. But also my immediate family lives here. I'm one of 4. In the summer of 2021, my dad had a heart attack, a triple bypass. And I guess we were kind of 2 and 2 as far as my siblings go on the 2 sides of this issue. And my mom let herself get caught up in the fear. And so basically asking without asking, one of those days when I was actually at the hospital, if you haven't gotten the shot, I don't want you to see him. So I was asked to ish without directly saying it, and I could just feel the other 2 siblings almost cheerleading that decision, if you will. So that was painful.
I see. Dividing family.
Yeah.
Making our closest kin ostensibly enemies. What a painful rupture. Go ahead.
I was going to say that the aspect that hit me hardest was isolation, because I live by myself and I'm of a certain age. And so I just didn't tell people, but my friends came over, we watched movies together. We had meals together. there was no way I was going to go spend time with my mother. You know, and she lived in a separate household, and I would hear people say, "Oh, well, you're not supposed to do it on Thanksgiving." I'm like, well, I wouldn't say what I would have said. But the other thing that really struck me, having grown up with alcoholics, I totally got it when the county where I lived in, they decided to leave liquor stores open. And that was very controversial. And then I read the reason. It's like, yeah, you don't want people going through withdrawal without any support. You know, I mean, they actually had a rationale for it, which I totally got, because my mother used to work in a detox unit as a nurse. It's not pretty. And if you're not going to provide resources for people to go through those withdrawals, then you better just keep giving them access to the alcohol until they're ready to not do it. Because you've got abuse going on, all kinds of stuff going on inside the home. And you can't leave the home. I mean, people joked about that. I saw this concert where this husband and wife had gotten out, and they go, "Oh, we finally got out of our house with teenagers, and we're having some time to ourselves," you know. They could joke about it, but there were other people living in very difficult circumstances and forced to stay home with people who were not, I gotta say toxic, who were toxic.
Right.
So it was just, you know, forget about the childhood development stuff that went on, but just the people that couldn't get away from abusive situations for even a minute because they weren't supposed to be out, unless they had a letter saying they were, you know, lawful business or whatever it was, you know, an essential business, which I drove around with in my car.
So you almost skipped ahead of me where I was going with something, but I'll save it. Does anybody else want to weigh in on when they saw the social strife element show up? Because I was going to go to the next one. Go ahead.
End of 2019, I had a really serious surgery for throat cancer. I was in a hospital, a new hospital in Colorado, where it was just open, brand new. Kind of got lucky. No one was in there. Except for me and this team, pretty much. And soon after that, you know, in recovering and so forth, and having to stay home quite a lot, and then into 2020, you know, suddenly there's this lockdown, and I'm a naturopath. I have patients coming to see me. I had a brick and mortar office, and suddenly patients didn't want to come in. They were really afraid of having contact. And, you know, I would see anybody who would come and see me. And for me, I didn't feel any fear about it. I just intuitively or energetically or whatever, I just didn't. But so I very rapidly started pivoting and started seeing patients online and so forth. But when it really started hitting me with the strife piece is, you know, when the vaccines came out, when they started locking down schools, I had a lot of calls from friends going, you know, we love you, Todd, we want you to take the shot, thinking, you know, just got through cancer, like, we don't want you getting this and dying. And so part of that was born from a genuine heart,
right,
you know, loving space and everything. And I'm like, no. I thank you and appreciate your concern. And I went into my ENT to do a checkup following surgery, and he actually said to me that he had observed some patients getting the shots and getting worse. So that was kind of a, you know, a really good message to me, actually. But soon after, there was a lot of conflictual kind of interaction with people around and friends in my community about vax, no vax. And it started creating a lot of conflict. And it was painful to see that amongst friends and family.
It is one of the worst things, because you wonder what the weight of these relationships really are. And more than the relationships sometimes, we all live in society with the tacit agreement that ultimately we're paying taxes into a government that may not be efficient, but is trying to do the right thing and is at least keeping the potholes filled, you know, at least keeping the street lights going, at least. right? And then there was a moment in COVID for many of us when authority looked nefarious. This is a very important point, because when we talk about healing the divide, social cohesion isn't just belief in people, it's belief in institutions. I want everybody to think about a moment when you were like, I don't know if the government means well at this point. Because I can remember mine. I'm driving through the barren wasteland of COVID 2020 Aurora. And I had if you would have seen me, you would have think this guy's having a psychotic episode. I broke down. And what broke me down was all of this yellow tape around playgrounds. Now, I had just had a baby girl. The playgrounds are outside. They are in the open wind. But children being banned from fun seemed to me the kind of overreach, and given what we knew, was the kind of overreach that seemed like it had a control element that meant harm. And I began to really wonder if there was something else afoot. So I ran over to that playground and I began to yell and cry and rip that yellow tape off of those slides. I'll tell you, as an extrovert, COVID was tough for me. COVID was tough. All right? I'm running out of money. I got a new baby to feed. And I can't even take it to the playground. I ripped it off. Almost hoping somebody from Parks and Rec would come along so I could give them a piece of my mind. Because how could you comply with this to me? See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that was my moment where I began to doubt authority in this sense. I had plenty of doubts about authority. That's my life story. But this instant, that was the moment I knew, or felt that I knew, that somebody in a higher position didn't mean well. What moment was that for you?
Mine, going back farther than you, mine was probably in 5th or 6th grade in Los Angeles when they were telling us that to duck and cover under our little steel school desk, and that would protect us from the nuclear bomb that was on its way from Russia. And
yeah,
that 12 or 13 years old, I'm like, this doesn't make much sense to me. And from that moment on, it was like, no.
Nobody's telling us the truth. Clearly. No, but I mean specifically about COVID, like what the government reaction to COVID though? Specifically, when was that? I see you and I see you. Right.
I was listening to a lecture by a molecular scientist out of Switzerland talk about the structure of the spike protein, that it had to come out of a laboratory, while the narrative was it was emerging from nature. And that was there were 3 different international scientists that had all weighed in with the same conclusion, had posted on some sort of a live access website where these scientists all hooked up at the same time, and they were told by some person to take it down. So that information and that analysis by somebody from China, somebody from the Switzerland, somebody from another country, I don't remember where, were all told that it had to come down. And there's some authority over a scientist, and
that was when you started saying,
Well, it was a verification of what I'd received in the journey. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So my fear was of the lie, not of the virus.
Right.
I knew a spell was being cast
Ooh, did you hear that? Spell was being cast. We ain't gonna go into that. Not right now, anyway.
That's my.
But you know, we can talk afterwards about these spells. But what I will say is that, so when you heard a report from scientists saying that the nature of the virus itself did not look like it came from a wet market in Wuhan.
Yeah, there were two. There was a French virologist who actually won Nobel Prize,
right.
Montague or something like that, and he's since been killed.
I know who I'm in the room with. I know who y'all be watching on Thursday. Yes, I do. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So that was your moment. The doctors. When you felt the authorities may be a little bit nefarious in this matter. When was it for you? And then I see a hand right next. Yep, you first.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. When I went to my favorite little grocery store for my organic foods, and they had started this 6 feet of distance, and they had put these things on the sidewalk, and you stand on your little, and that was the day I just blew. I couldn't take it anymore. I was done. I was over it. I had a confrontation with the manager of the store, who I knew well enough. He knew me by name. I knew him by name. And when they started really pushing masking, and I was like, I cannot, health-wise, wear this covering. I get a headache within 6 minutes. I can't re-breathe my own carbon dioxide. I can't do this. So he then said, well, you can just wear the shield. And I'm like, oh, okay. So this is really serious. If I can just wear this shield and still get in the store.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the store, and I'm, touching the produce, doing my thing, and this woman comes up behind me, you're touching everything, you're touching everything. And I was just like, oh my goodness, we've all gone nuts. The world's gone crazy, and I don't know what to do.
That was when you first doubted the authority. Because it seemed like hella random. Like 6 feet, why? Not 4 feet or 7.
Yeah.
Right. Got you.
Yeah.
Right. I had that same feeling. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm also a naturopathic physician, and early on I was not afraid to treat it because I do know how to treat viruses, and it was not scary, and I was very quickly on phone and video with practitioners all over the world. How can we come together to figure out how to serve our communities? And then I received a letter from the FDA and the FCC that said, if you share publicly that there are safe and effective treatments for COVID, we will take away your license and you will risk going to jail.
Wow.
And that was a big first clue.
That's a clue.
There's implications in that.
Yeah. That's kind of a giant red clue. Okay, yeah. Who else? Anybody, the moment where you're like, I don't know if the authorities mean me well in COVID.
Well, at that time I worked as a pastor in North Hollywood, in a small congregation, and we somewhat pride ourselves to be an independent church with a very, very traditional liturgy in the form of bread and wine that is given and taken from a common cup. So I went through these stages. First, to your previous question, when a number of congregants and there were colleagues from the Board of Trustees turned against the idea of the root of our liturgy, of sharing that meal together. And then, of course, my livelihood depends on that, and my family's livelihood depends on that, because we were 501c3 based on donations. So, of course, from a certain point of view, I'm dependent on the recognition of my own congregants. But then it went a step further. Of course, LA County had a very, very swift and radical approach on executing those laws and regulations rather. And I, from the get-go, had a question: why are we as church not consider essential businesses? Considering that, well, whatever, people like to go and congregate, and that's their freedom. from the beginning when this nation was created.
Freedom of religion.
And so just individual worship and congregating together. And then, of course, news started reaching us. If we do indeed congregate, our 501c3 status can be revoked.
Wow.
And
that part.
Yeah, that part. And of course, then I, as a pastor, was given a freedom to make that choice, whether or not go ahead or not.
Yeah.
So, but essentially, that brought that question to me.
The revocation of your 501c3 status because you didn't comply might throw some doubts on the authority who gave that edict. Yeah. Anybody else before we move on to this next section, because we are going to get into it now. And then.
Oh, yeah. So I was working in 2019. I had walked away from a career for many reasons, but I needed money, and so I was working at a thrift store and hardly making any money at all. And we did shut down for a little bit, but then we opened back up, and we were told all these new regulations and things that we had to adhere to. And there were arrows on the floor, and we were supposed to enforce it as clerks making like $14.25 an hour. And not only that, like I was supposed to come into work and not allowed to clock in until I had like turned the computer on, logged into the system, taken my own temperature, recorded my own temperature, and then if I didn't have a fever, I could go ahead and clock in and work. And I'm like, okay, this is illegal. Like, I'm here and I should be able to clock in the second that I get here and get paid. And then also the city had enforced a mask mandate and we were supposed to enforce it as employees. And I was like, that you want me to fight people? Like, I'm getting paid nothing, like, no. And I definitely at that point was just like, this is insane, this is crazy. Like, and I didn't trust the city that passed the mask mandate, the managers who are telling us that we are now enforcement of all of these things.
Right, you're a cop now.
Right.
That's deep, right? The passing of the buck of authority.
Yeah.
Trying to create accountability for something unaccountable.
Yeah.
Right. Sir, did I see your hand? The moment you said, I don't know if the authorities necessarily mean me well in this COVID era.
I used to live in New York.
Oh, goodness. That's all you had to say, bro?
I worked on Madison Avenue right by Grand Central. I think the first reported case in New York was right down the street from my office. And I left New York shortly after because I just saw this. I saw it coming. I was like, well, I'm on an island. They can shut the bridges down. I'm on an island. They can shut the bridges down. And so I got out. But I came back maybe a year later and I saw these people walking around with these white cards. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with what happened in New York at the time, but everyone had to have these vaccination cards. And I remember I was like having this dystopian moment where I was almost, so my ancestors are German, right? So you go back and you start thinking about how that all went down and you realize like, what did they do? They separated people, right? And now all of a sudden, instead of an armband, we have these white cards.
Papers, please.
Papers, please. Exactly. New York's a lot of Jewish folks in New York. So that was the moment when I was like, nobody's at the wheel. You know, there's no one with like thoughtful intent at the wheel here. We're just rolling out. And the scariest part was the compliance. It was how many people just didn't even realize that was a problem or that it could be a problem. And that was particularly scary for me. That was the, well, it probably wasn't the first moment, but it was like the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
Oh, this is beyond. And we're like just a step away from something, you know.
Truly dystopian.
Yeah. So, and thank God we seem to have come back from that edge, but...
Well, we still bear the scars, don't we? Some of us literally, and we're going to get into that. Allison said, I got to share something before we move on to this next phase, because you thought we was getting into it. Not yet. Go ahead, Allison.
the wake-up call for me was I was doing a podcast with a woman from the Green Party in Israel. And the mandate, it had come down the pipe that they wanted to do 100% compliance in Israel to make sure that every single person was vaccinated in Israel. And I remember sitting in my cabin listening to her story. She could not leave the house. They were under absolute attack. And at that time I realized, really? How is this come to be? And the tragedy of the remembering of the legacy, the experience of that again, was very much what she was speaking into, but she was also afraid for her life. She was truly afraid for her life. And that was a major shift. It's like, well, it looks pretty easy over here compared to what it is over there.
Yeah.
Then it became a different.
It's those historical triggers. I may speak on that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm named after my grandfather, who was a Tuskegee Airman.
Oh.
First black men to fly. As you know, growing up as the grandson of a Tuskegee Airman, you got to learn everything associated with the word Tuskegee. My grandfather lived to be 89, which is like 1,000 years in black man years. And so and like his health span was pretty much that long. Like his worst year was his last year. He had a good health span. The guy's driving around carrying stuff, talking crazy, forgetting how old he is, right? He's in good spirits, right? Fighting guy. And he said, "Son, I never go to the doctor ever." He said, "If the bone's poking through the skin, maybe. But if the bone's just broken, you wrap that up." Right? But he cultivated in us this, what we call now, I know, iatrophobia. Fear of the doctor. I work out incessantly because I am my own healthcare. I ain't going, right? And that was passed down in our family. So when the vaccine finally came along, bodily autonomy was huge in my family. Being the descendant of people who got here due to the very lack of control of their bodies, the fact that my liberal brothers and sisters couldn't see it was especially triggering. Because listen, in the year 2020, they burned down the world telling the world that my life mattered. 2021 come along and they forget that. All because I opposed them on this issue when I tell them the same misgivings I have about the police I have about medicine. In fact, if you pile up the bodies between them, I'm safer with the cops than the doctor. If you really want to keep it 100%. Right? So this was huge for me. But now we're at when the vaccine enters the public. Now, Phil will tell you, 4 months before the vaccine mandates came along, they told us at the State House that was just conspiracy theory. That would never happen. Well, here they are. Forced. I called it the viper with the billion fangs. That's what I called it. But my main fallout with the vaccine was when a vaccinated person gave me COVID. A vaccinated person gave me COVID the night we did the CRT discussion with the black conservatives and black liberals. Right there in Cleo Parker Robinson, a lady who came to my event after being vaccinated. She was one of them ones I call the branch COVIDians. Man, they doing it all. They doing it all. Everything they said. The branch COVIDians, they play by the rules, right? That's what I called them. She gave me COVID from not knowing that she had it. And her shame. Her shame. Her shame. She felt so bad. She felt so sorry. She apologized 1,000 times. Didn't understand what was going on. That was my major moment of saying, what are we doing this for? Now we're at the vaccine part of the program when they're actually out. Does anybody want to share? I don't know, probably somebody got some stories. Does anybody want to share when they realized for sure that this thing wasn't going to work? When you realized for sure wasn't nobody flattening the curve, nobody was going to make this go away, it was here. When did you know?
When everybody who was vaccinated was getting COVID.
That's the Omicron era, late 2021.
Omicron, I forgot.
Remember Omicron? Yeah. Knocking out vaccines like Mike Tyson. That's what Omicron did, right? When everybody who was vaccinated got COVID in December, the whole flu season of 2021. When did you realize this thing wasn't going to work? Just wasn't going to work.
It's a virus.
It's a virus, dude.
2 words: safe and effective.
Safe and effective. Oh.
I was like, anyone with a modicum of scientific background knows there's always outlying groups.
Yeah.
98%.
Yeah. I'm like, really? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We're paying for it now too. All the things.
Listen, since I know who in the room, we just gonna call it what it is. You know, it's not effective. We know that part. The safe part, we'll get into that. How about anybody else who realized the vaccine? Because we could talk about how angry he was about it, but that's like a more, I don't want to trigger that. But when did you know this for a fact wasn't going to be it? My friend.
When the first vaccine came out, and then, obviously, seems like a lot of people in this room were aware of the nefariousness in that. But then the second one came out, and then the third one came out, and they just kept on, piling them on. And it's like, well, the first one didn't work, now everybody else is getting sick, or everybody who got it is getting sick. And almost everybody I know who didn't get it, didn't get the vaccine, also didn't get COVID. And so, a lot of these things just added up, and it's like, what's going on, government?
Yeah. Yeah. The multiple rare breakthrough infections. Remember? Rare. So rare. Rarely happens when the breakthrough infections happen, right? But I want to start here because that moment where that liberal friend of mine who played by the rules felt so ashamed, it was actually the moment my heart began to open up to those on the other side of the vaccine issue for me. Because what I heard in her pain was the kind of real group effort that like you would see in like World War II, like buy these bonds, everybody do your part. I thought I did my part, right? Because I had to ask myself, so what's the virtue that us in medical freedom are fighting for? Sovereignty. What's more American than that? Like the ability to be free, right? So then I asked myself, what's the virtue that maybe pro-vaccine was fighting for? What was the virtue? Why did they feel that their side was correct morally? Collective effort. When they were trying to get everybody right, why? To protect the sick. They were trying to protect the vulnerable in their most pure, like when their motives were the most pure, right? Was there a moment for you when you saw the other side and with all the damage inflicted was like, I get it. I know what you were trying to do. Was there a moment like that? There's somebody like, I don't care about none of what they talking about. Nope. Or, but if there was, would you mind sharing that? What's up?
I don't remember this happening after the vaccine. I remember it happening from the very earliest days. I remember being around people that had such a violent reaction to folks that weren't in compliance that I never really felt at odds with them. It was always just an awareness of they don't have the capacity to kind of distance themselves from this heavy mind identification of this belief. And it was kind of ripping them from the inside. It felt very kind of violent. And so I felt really compassionate. So I remember when I kind of shifted my, I looked mostly, I think, compliant as far as going out in public and doing anything, because I was wanting to make sure that if anyone needed something for themselves, that I wasn't the one that was standing in the way of them having a stable emotional state, because that was, a heightened, kind of like highly activated fight or flight over a prolonged period of time is so detrimental for physiology. And if I was a cause of someone spiking like that and pinging off the walls, I didn't feel good. And so I remember kind of adjusting and thinking, how can I just give as much grace as possible to not get people whipped up? Because I watched it happen so, in the beginning. And so that was my adjustment there. And it was compassion, because I didn't want to be the cause of anyone not being able to regulate their nervous system if they saw something that made them nervous that I was doing. Right? So that's what I remember. And then I thought, okay, let me just figure out how to kind of move in and out of here without ruffling things too much.
Got you. Yeah. Just didn't want to make somebody have a worse day than they could have.
Yeah, truth.
That's what's up, yeah.
So, I mean, this touches on something that we talk about, my wife and I talk about a lot, is this concept of the greater good. And
what is that? Yeah.
And that was like the driving factor of everybody has to get the shots, right? Everybody has to wear the masks, because we need to protect the greater good. And if you don't get the shot, you're selfish. You're gonna kill grandma, and you're just selfish. So do your part for society, because you live in this society.
Right.
And you need to do your part living in our culture, our world. This is what we're doing, and everybody needs to get the shot. And if you don't get the shot, you're not protecting the greater good. And that's something that I haven't been able to figure out. Like, how do we address that?
How do we address the question of the greater good? And what was that? Right? We'll come back to that. Who else had a moment where, though you may have been on team vaccine hesitant to vaccine hell no, you saw the other side and was like, I get it. Who else had a moment like that? Are you still looking for that moment? Is that moment yet to arrive? Friend.
I owned a bicycle shop at the time.
Yeah.
Luckily, we were deemed essential. I never had to shut down, so I didn't ever lose my means of supporting my family.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a time where I was like, I don't want to wear a mask, but I can't sell a bicycle if I don't have a mask on, because all these jabronis are out there just freaking out if I have my face covering down. So I would wear one just because if I couldn't, I might get reported, but more so, I would lose sales. And so maybe that was selfish of me at the time, to just kind of deal with it as like, all right, I got to keep the status quo, but I had to do it, but it also made me realize people would freak out if my mask was down, and it was lame, but it was what I had to do to keep on supporting my family.
Right. So what's the greater good, right? Yeah. Anybody else that had a moment that was like, okay, team pro-vaccine, I get it. It's all good. How you, what's your name?
Andrea.
Okay, how you doing?
So I was part of multiple groups very early on, so even before the vaccine, and we were meeting up in little places that we could. And one day before I even got to the meetup space, there was a lady who was outside and she was masked, and she saw a whole bunch of people in our lovely little space unmasked and talking and not separating our 6 feet. And she started freaking out and yelling at some of these group members, and the group members started yelling back at her and calling her names and honestly being really rude and childish. And I saw the video of this and
oh gosh,
felt incredibly bad. So this lady who was freaking out honestly just kept asking, like, why are you here? Why are you here? And it was a legitimate question that she had. And so I ended up writing a big long letter to apologize to her for how my friends had treated her, and answered that question. Why are we here? And I didn't have any way to give it to her specifically, but she had actually called the police. So I sent it to the police station and said, if you know who this woman is, can you please give her this apology and let her know she has an honest question. I want to give her an honest answer.
That's humane as it gets. That's super humane, right? Yeah. Here we are stuck on the planet with everybody else.
That's right.
Let me tell you, I saw the moment where a lot of pro-vax started seeing what anti-vax were talking about. Their breakthrough came with their breakthrough infection. A lot of my friends who were definitely in camp, get vaccinated, protect yourself. It was Omicron season, man. I'll never forget this because I was in my liberal echo chamber just watching folks, right? And I saw folks kind of slowly come around like, okay, when does this end? When do we get our world back? I've played by the rules. I've done my part. Nothing is as promised. That was a particularly dangerous moment for the establishment. Because those were the folks who were holding the line for them. When they began to have doubts, that's when things began to change. And what I realized was that there were certain folks on my page, my old thermometer for the populist's opinion, my social media, where folks started commenting peacefully again on my content, right? And I realized that there was this moment, right, after Omicron season, where things were going to start getting back to normal. Because if you had been vaccinated, you know, there was nothing else to do but get another one. And if you had been vaccinated, you wasn't going to get it then. We had to go on with our lives. But the wounds, I believe, showed up in the voting booth last November. It wasn't done. Folks weren't done. I believe 100%, especially working in, y'all know by now, I worked with Robert Kennedy directly. You know, I was in the Maha thing when it began. At ground zero, nonetheless. But I realized that Bobby's contingency was going to put Trump over. I knew. I saw it. And it was because the people who we entrusted on land, I'm speaking as somebody who still leans left. My left politics is what they are. My left beliefs are what they are, you know. I'm the love is love guy. I'm the my life matters guy, but not more than yours, by the way, right? But that we all do, right? And the team that I had been voting for didn't do what they were supposed to do, which was just protect the people's rights. Why do we have HIPAA? Right? Why do we have right to privacy for medical information? Why do we have laws to protect workers from unfair termination? Why do we even have these things? These things all came from the left. They came from the left, and they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I find myself hanging out with Bobby Kennedy, right? Where was I supposed to go? Right? I'm kicking it with Dale Bigtree now. Hey, Dale, how you doing? Right? What am I supposed to do? And so these are the things that I feel like we can at least find common ground on understanding the authority didn't do what they were supposed to do. Have you seen any reconnections with folks from the other side of this issue in your own life? Has there been like bridges, you know, that you kind of put some some paint back on a little bit? Have you rebuilt?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll offer one.
Yeah.
No one else wants to.
Yeah, yeah.
If they do, please do. It started with, I have a family of doctors. I'm from a family, many doctors in the family.
Yeah.
And it came when my brother, and I was ostracized, not agreeing to the policies called, if you're not going to get that, and I'm not saying I'm not, right? There's still that fear like, oh, can I say that I didn't? Because at the time, if you said that you didn't, you were going to get ostracized in a whole new way, right?
Right.
But the moment when my brother started waking up to it, and then I want to circle back to the shame. He was like, oh my gosh, I got mom, but then he saw the wisdom of what was being spoken through other lenses, and then the silencing that had happened on top of those of us who tried to say anything at the time led to this eruption surprise at the polls. Because those voices, we were silenced for so long that you had to stay underground, and it wasn't until the polls and Bobby coming down the middle, and that's how I know many of you, was Bobby coming down the middle, and then all of a sudden throw right or throw left or duck again. It became this game of hiding that I'm still a little shaky about. To be quite honest, it's like, oh, are we on TV? Did I just say that? Was my mother listening? And, you know, she went to the assisted living and she had to be, and there's a little bit of the cortisol dump that still happens when I think about this topic. But most of all, the surprise vote. And then if by chance I had been a vote for health, then it's assumed that I must be a Trumpster.
Yeah, right.
Because you can't be both. And so this discord of identity with a right or a left or a middle or an upside down, it's still shaky, honestly. Still a little shaky.
A political binary just don't be telling the whole story, do they?
No, I don't
They
think
just
so.
don't be telling the whole story. You know what I mean? I'm left on some things, I'm right on other things. It doesn't tell the whole story. Then there's always compromises in election season. Always. Try being an influencer. People like, can you? And I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, it showed up at the polls. It really did. These coalitions, bedfellows that were really uncommon, showed up, right? And we know who won. Like we know who benefited from that, right? Any other people that can tell me, like, when did you start seeing like folks kind of mending fences after this whole fiasco?
Honestly, the reason I came here is an interesting conversation. It's the first one I hear.
Speak a little louder.
Yeah, it's the first one I hear and see since that time. My impression is nothing has been done. In fact, you're pointing something out to me about the election as a kind of a valve when that energy can be released. So on one hand, I don't see much reconciliation. It's just typical. Well, we all kind of woke up. Some of us woke up during those years, and then everybody went back to sleep really quick. It's interesting. This is a beginning for me to see that there's a new, that there will be outlets when this conversation taking place. And I think it's going to go way more towards the future. The other question for me is if the election is one of these vows when this unspoken is all of a sudden appearing, revealing itself, what else, in what forms, in businesses, in health choices, where else, educational choices, how else it will manifest in an unpredictable way. Not in a way that is facilitated by societal conversation, but actually has this element of projection of anger or release. And that's dangerous. I think that in that regard, COVID is just the beginning of a longer process in society.
You nailed on something, bro, because that's what we're here to prevent. Listen, man. Remember back in 08, they said something was too big to fail? That's America, man. Listen, we got to figure this out. Because having traveled the world just recently, we are the big domino. We are the big domino. A lot depends on what direction America goes. It just does. And if we fall into social strife and chaos, what happens is that power vacuums end up showing up on the global stage. There ain't necessarily that many good options out there. You know what I mean? Versus an America that gets it right and gets it together. Versus an America that figures out how to be a country with each other again. No one talks about this phenomenon called social cohesion. Social cohesion and the erosion thereof has, by some institutions, been studied as one of the greatest threats to humankind. Up there with, like, the oceans emptying and toxins and nuclear war. Social cohesion is measurable. Sociologists do this all the time. They go into a coffee shop, a bar, and they'll sit there and just watch folks. They people watch, and they do this. They're paid by grants to do this. And they'll look at how many value-added interactions happen. They'll literally sit there. Who shakes hands? Who sparks up small talk? Who exchanges business cards? And you can measure the health of a society via social cohesion, never discussed in America, right? Social cohesion, erosion, is screaming at us, and it is upstream of almost every horrific thing that happens in this country. From active shootings to suicides to gang violence, everything is about social cohesion. And the thing that was interrupted the most in COVID was the cohesive bonds of human beings. Phil said it felt like an attack on humanity itself, right? Because nobody talks about it. We don't know that it's a thing, that it matters, that it's upstream of all of these things. But other countries prioritize it, right? Other countries know this. But since America's America, we think that since we're the biggest party, we're the only party sometime, right? Let me tell you something. I just came back from a land where my DNA test said my ancestors were taken from. I got the darn thing and they said Ghana, right? The majority of my ancestors came from the country of Ghana in West Africa. Shortly thereafter that, Nigeria, so I got to go there, Togo and Benin and the Congo, right? And then Ireland, which was fun. Right? Yeah. I'm 19% European. That's what it looks like. Hey, right? We're all family. But the point was, going to Ghana, the cohesion is off the charts compared to here. Yeah. Yo, I didn't realize this. The peace in Ghana is based on the fact that they prioritize helping one another in a way that will freak you out a little bit. It was the best customer service ever. Ever. I'm talking about to the point where like it made me uncomfortable. You guys are just helping me out? What's going on? And these are people, and then I was like, okay, because I was going to these hotels and stuff, we had to travel all over the country. And I tried to tip people, then they wouldn't take a tip. I was like, so you're just doing this? We go to the villages, right? Poverty that would shock your Western sensibilities in northern Ghana. Northern Ghana, right? Because like southern Ghana, that's where all the fun stuff's happening, right? Northern Ghana, man, folks actually still living in functional huts. For real, for real. You know what I mean? By the way, they were the coolest structures in the village.
Yeah.
Like, they actually release heat, and like, they're actually like a low-key advanced technology that like is deceptively advanced, right? But what was happening was that we walked to this village, majority Muslim. Northern Ghana is Muslim. And I just saw two men holding hands. No, they don't do LGBTQ in Africa. It's just what it is. That's what it is. But these two men were holding hands, just walking with one another, right? And the children were not crying. They all had food, because in poverty, sharing makes it stretch. The cohesion in America needs to be prioritized and put front and center. And I began to realize that in trying to control the virus and get it under control, we were trying to control people. Trying to control the virus. How you gonna do that?
With a mask.
Right, with a mask, obviously. Right? We won't get into that because we're gonna talk about that afterwards. But we were trying to control people, and people, especially Americans, resent being controlled violently. We don't like that here, especially, right? But now that we know that social cohesion is a thing, it is upstream of almost all the problems that we have. We have to start talking about it and putting it front and center, because power at the price of cohesion is what gets us into chaos. There is no way that we get to have the America that we want with power over cohesion. We got to start designing systems that put cohesion front and center. We got to start having politics that put cohesion front and center. You understand what I'm saying? If not, these outcomes that you're talking about, bro, you're spot on. You're spot on. They will erupt in ways that are violent and unpredictable and irreparable. And if anybody gonna start doing that, it's gotta be us, because we're who we are. It had to start somewhere. So it might as well be this group of folks, right? And so that's what we want to do. And I'm bringing y'all here today, to have this conversation. I really just wanted to say that. But I had to lead the conversation there. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So when it comes to cohesion, what does that mean to you? To me, here's how I do cohesion in my daily life. I make sure I brush my teeth real good, and I smile at people. Not in an awkward way, like, you know what I mean? But just like in a cool, like, hey, how you doing? And I do that. Like, it was so good in Ghana because everybody smiles back at you. They really do. But I do that in the story, like, you'll realize how many people, like, I ain't about that life. No. And, like, they, like, look down and stuff, you know what I mean? But I do it anyway. And I figured out how to smile in a way that, like, don't make people weird. You know what I'm saying? Because that could happen.
This can happen.
Right. Or I go out of my way to say hi to my neighbors. I go out of my way to shovel their driveway. Right?
Yes.
I go out of my way to see if I can be the value-added interaction in cohesion that brings folks together. All right, good night. But no, we were going to draw this to a close, but I just wanted to say, like, is there anything that you think you could do? Is there anything that, like, you feel like you could add to that?
From our experience, luckily, my whole family decided not to get vaccinated, and without any pressure from us particularly. But our friends, many of my friends are in medical field, and they all, almost to a person, got vaccinated. And almost all of them regret it at this point. Not that they had particular reactions or anything, but they got sick. They saw people get sick who had been vaccinated. Not a one of them said anything other than, I will never get vaccinated again. You know, with any COVID boosters. You keep hoping they're going to admit we were right. It's never going to happen. Yes, I feel like I want to hold the people in power accountable. I don't forgive them. They should be held accountable. But my friends who were coerced into getting shots, or actually believed the lies, got shots thinking it was going to protect them and protect others. They're never going to apologize. They might not even, and not a single one has admitted they were wrong. I forgive them. I don't care. They bought into it just like everybody else bought into it.
But the power.
We wanted to believe that this is going to protect everybody, and it ended up being a lie. So I think our forgiveness of the sheep, if you will, is warranted. And how can you have cohesion if you are angry at your friends for not apologizing, for not listening to you? He said, I was trying to tell you, don't do this. They're lying. And they didn't believe us.
That's part of what got Bobby where he is, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And that accountability, it's kind of his job now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like in RFK, you know, from getting to know the man, I can tell you 100%, he means well. People got a lot to say about him. I get it. You know, I laugh at myself. I'm going to laugh at Bobby if the joke is funny. It's just what it is, right? But I can tell you that the dude, he sacrificed so much.
So much.
Dude's really saying, like, when you see him up close and it rips him apart, he wants to do the right thing. And he's creating the structures for that structural accountability. Bobby's presence there is part of that retribution. So, like, vengeance is mine, say somebody up there, and that's working its way out. You know what I'm saying? But I feel you, my brother from New York.
Yeah, I wanted to bring light to something that's perhaps you wouldn't normally see, which I'm in technology, I work in venture capital. We invest in like the latest, greatest, whatever bullshit. One of the most concerning things that I see the way that we're organizing our society is abdicating power to technology.
Exactly.
Bro,
So if you want to talk about what's eroding social cohesion, it's actually the access to indiscriminate amounts of information with no truth.
Yeah. That's right.
Bro.
So please, like, be wary of anything that consumes your attention. Like, your human attention is the product.
That's right.
That's what makes it all go. I mean, when you really strip it all away. And so wherever you give your attention, you give your power. So be very mindful when you use AI. Be very mindful when you use social media. Be very mindful when you read the news. Because it is not meant to inform you. It is meant to capture your attention.
That's right.
Dude, that's the dude's plain spoken. He just says what's up. You know what I'm saying? No. And this is huge right now.
Because if we want to repair the thing you're pointing at,
bro,
we have to look at what's consuming our attention.
Listen, what consumes my attention as an influencer are my platforms. My precious platforms. And I was like, yo, I might be an influencer, and it's my energy. I gotta watch my state of consciousness when I put out, and I gotta watch what I invite. And since I've been back, like, I'm really acutely aware of that, because, yo, the things that are going on in the power structure have had me red furious. And I know that if I post something that invites that, invites the rage, right? And I've done it. Like, since the election, oh God, I have got back on my soapbox. I'm saying all the things, being real critical. And I was like, you know what? Nah, bro, that's not it right now. That's the backdrop. That's gonna make this stuff stand out. The vitriol in the country, the poison is going to be the thing that makes the medicine shine brighter. But I had to make a commitment within myself to, like, if I'm gonna do it, there's gotta be some medicine in there. If I'm going to address the venom, there's gotta be some anti-venom in there. And that means that I will have had to process some of this myself. You see what I'm saying? Critique ain't gonna all the way get it if I'm just making folks wrong. You see what I'm saying? And I've done, like, more recently than I care to admit, okay? But since I've been back, I've been like, okay, what can I do that's productive? Because I know how destructive I can be. You see what I'm saying? And that's my part. That's what's under my jurisdiction. Making sure that I at least maintain that on those platforms that consume our attention, that if you come to my page, you're gonna get something a little more medicinal than you will get someplace else. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to do. And that's why we're making this film. Right? We got about 10 minutes left to really talk about solutions. What do you think are some of the solutions, my friend? What's up, bro?
I just heard a couple of quotes or recommendations. Very simple thing. I've taken them to heart. One of them is you're not really listening unless you're willing to be changed by another. That was the first one. And then the second one said, you know, if you bring respect, curiosity, and generosity, things work out really well.
Right.
And so I took my calendar on my computer and then put respect, curiosity, generosity in to show up every single day at the top of my calendar. And then I share this quote about you're not really listening if you're not willing to be changed. I share it everywhere with everyone and people go, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so I think that resonates.
Right.
And so I don't have a platform. I'm not influencing large numbers of people. But it's a heartfelt integrity place for me to grow and develop myself and moving towards other people from those two perspectives. That's what I try to bring.
Are you willing to be changed? Or you just 10 toes down on knowing that you got this one all the way correct, right? Right. My brother.
Yes.
What was your name? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry?
I was like, what is your name, sir?
Oh, my name's Ward.
I was supposed to ask that to everybody, and I'm not remembering that. Enough. Ward.
I just wanted to share my experiences that might have something to do with trying to be positive and find agreement. My earthly family, my immediate family and cousins, I'm kind of the only person that holds the opinions that I do. And they're different than the other people in my family. And some of them are very committed to those feelings that they have. And I think some of it, and I even frankly kind of heard it here, this almost, why be under any label, whether it's right or left or liberal or conservative? What's the truth? And some of the things you said about AI and social media sucking our attention out, basically, I really thought about, because I've been sharing posts and things, and I'm not sure if there's any real knowledge or anything to be gained from it, but it tickles the intelligentsia or something. And what I've found in trying to share with people, now that there's a new sheriff in town, to paraphrase his own administration's speaking, what is actually being said? Let's get specific. Let's not speak in generalities. And can you identify what the things are? And then let's talk about those and take it issue by issue. And finding points that I can agree with, whether it's a niece or something sharing something from Bernie Sanders or whatever, or somebody, a cousin that might be sharing something from I don't know if David Duke is still around, but from that extreme.
Yeah, okay.
If you can understand what
No,
I'm
he's still around, yeah.
Yes. And finding out maybe some points of agreement and thanking them for sharing it, because when I post something, there's a little bit of yourself that you're becoming a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you are opening yourself up to criticisms or attacks. So I try to find things that perhaps can be agreed upon, thank them for sharing, saying why I may not agree with what they share and being specific about it, so that it keeps it to the issues and not, when you gave your introduction, making it personal.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted to share. Perhaps the labeling, who cares? And why dig your heels in, like, I'm third generation Democrat, I'm always going to vote, according to the union boss or something.
Right. Absolutely. Making sure that you affirm folks for at least trying to share what they're talking about, and understanding that, like, when you share something, you really just talking about you, ultimately. You know what I'm saying? So, what are you sharing about yourself? Yeah. And was there anybody else before we closed out?
One thing I find too is to ask questions and open questions.
Yeah.
And instead of just trying to shove things down people's throat, to ask questions. So,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that, or how did you come to that conclusion? Are you aware? This is a trick I learned a long time ago from some folks. So, like, you ask, "Are you aware of that?" Instead of just saying, "This is the truth." Are you aware that an 18-year-old in America, now, if they follow the CDC schedule, will get upwards of 80 vaccines? Are you aware of that? People will be like,
right.
Rather than saying,
an 18-year-old.
Right.
Yeah,
so
right.
Ask a lot of questions.
Right.
It helps with that cohesion and helps people maybe listen to you.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Are you aware of that? I'm going to put that in the old Rolodex. I have my friend here, and then
I have a question about what you mean by social cohesion, because there's a German investigative reporter who lived in China for 10 years and wrote a book, and he moved back to Germany to write the book. And it's called We Are Harmonized: Surveillance Under the Chinese System. And if you don't go out the front door when all of your neighbors are going out the front door, you lose social credits.
Oh, no, we ain't
So there's this tricky thing about cohesion, and what does that mean? Back to what you're talking about, which is, I feel like the critical issue is sovereignty over one's soul.
Right.
Because when our attention's being hacked in very insidious ways to be safe and to be comfortable, then we lose our capacity to choose where our attention's going, right?
Absolutely. That sounds more like social coercion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
we didn't had enough of that around here. Yeah. And
so there's a capacity to be with others when you're with yourself, really with yourself. Right.
Right. So what they generally study is value-added interactions, positive interactions. Because you can interact with people completely negatively, you can just punch them in the face. That's not a value-added interaction, right? Or if somebody's like forcing you to do something, that's not a value-added interaction. Yeah. It's literally, and then what else? Really? Cool. I do that too. Yeah, laughter, a smile, that gets noted. You know what I mean? A business card. How about here's my social media, things like that.
Connection.
So that positive value-added connections,
yes,
versus just everybody forced to go into the same place. I because I haven't heard from over here. You had your hand up. We got
You asked about solutions to
Yes,
all
ma'am.
of this, and we need to speak openly. We need to open our minds, and we need practical solutions to systems, to broken down relationships. But I'd like to say that for me at least, I use prayer as a solution to feeling despair, to experiencing tremendous discrimination during this time. I use prayer to open my own eyes and to help heal. So if I can heal as an individual, if I can heal my children, my family, maybe that prayer will help heal on a larger scale. And that too is part of the solution.
Right. If you look at the energy and intention behind that prayer, you know, there's some healing vibes. There's positivity behind that. You know what I mean? Thank you very much for sharing that, sis. We got time for, I think, one or two more people. What are we looking at? Yeah, we got a time for like maybe 1 or 2 more people.
And then the wrap up.
Yeah. Then the wrap up. I saw, okay.
There's one over here and one over there and one over there.
1, 2, 3. Could you make it in a minute? All right, sir, go ahead. Solutions.
What for me was central was being canceled. The needing to self-censor or to speak in a way that I'm dodging the fact that I'm a white male, that I sure wouldn't want to appear racist, feminist, or misogynist, right? And I felt this real strongly in myself, and I'm one who likes to engage a lot socially. And I've listened to a number of historians talk about what prevailed in Nazi Germany, and several people who have been heavily canceled professionally who said that their friends would come up to them. For example, in a university, the other professors would come up and say, look, I'm with you on this, but I don't dare say anything.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
That always sucks, doesn't it? Like, dude, speak up. Yeah.
Now I'll lose my job, I've got a family, I can't do that. And this self-censorship and the inhibition of our truth and our self-expression is like silent, suppressive. When we censor ourselves before even giving the world a chance to do it, I think, yeah, what's our light? What are we meant to express here, and what difference does it make?
Thank you.
Well, I can definitely say I'm no stranger to, you know, one's identity that you can't control being something that somebody would look upon negatively. And what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do?
You know, when it first hits you, it's super, super fresh. You know, one thing that if it's healthy, if your reactions are healthy, it should do is put you in compassion with people who have had that happen to them. And to estimate the degree for which that is consequential. And then don't let it close your heart, let it open it. And then find commonality. Understand that the moment that they don't have courage might be the turning point for them having courage for the rest of their lives. I remember the moment that I bowed my head to power. But nobody who knows me as a warrior knows that. See what I'm saying? So this moment where they're being like silent when they know they shouldn't, that conflict could be their awakening. And that's how I forgive those. Because who be like just leaving me out to dry when they don't speak up. Because I left somebody out to dry. And I never would do that again. So we're all in our own journey and we're all in our own process. And understand that like that just might be the moment, but me facing discrimination made me sensitive to others who had faced it. And I wanted to hear their stories. And I wanted to hear how they got past it. I wanted to hear how they overcame it. Give me some tools. Give me anything, because this hurts, right? And we became more in harmony with one another. That's what it should do. You see what I'm saying? So I feel you. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Yeah. They might have their awakening for being silent when they shouldn't right now. All right? Ma'am.
Well, right after the election, I realized that we were going to have to turn up the volume on love. And I realized that if the other party had won, that I would have just been like, okay, cool, everything's fine. I don't have to do anything. But as it turned out, I realized, wow, I'm going to have to turn up the volume. So I really love what you're saying about the social cohesion. And so I've been trying to do that every day. This is what I just do. And just as an example, I'm in Whole Foods, getting my stuff, gonna go through the self-checkout, and there's one checker open. They're by themselves because everyone else is in the self-checkout. And she has on this great bright costume, not costume, just clothes, but it just felt just so bright, colorful. And she saw me go into the line of the self, and we looked at each other, and I immediately turned around and went around to be with her. And I said, I would much rather be over here with you. You are so beautiful, than over there in the self-checkout. And we just got to have a conversation. And I realized it doesn't even matter who she voted for. So we are having a human connection. And it would not be something that I would have done if I hadn't had this idea that we need to turn up the volume. But I think it's going to end up being great because we're all going to turn up the volume.
Value-added interactions with other human beings.
Yeah.
More of that. Thank you very much. That's what's in your power. You don't have to be an elected official. You never know what that butterfly effect could be. Somebody over here?
I'll say something. One thing I'm tracking in myself is what's at risk. The world that I want to live in isn't going to exist if I'm not at risk. If I'm not willing to go to that edge of discomfort and then go past it, then the world I want to live in will never be a thing.
Right.
And so, how do we change it? We put ourselves at risk.
Good old courage.
Yeah. And
Home of the brave, ain't we?
We just stand.
That's what I thought it said.
Stand together. You know,
Right.
we're at risk. Something it's got to cost something.
Right.
You know, like it doesn't come for free. It's to your point, right? So that's like my new orientation. Because I've lived a lot of my life as a tall, white, successful guy. I fucking haven't had to risk shit. Let's be honest, you know? And now I'm like, wow, that's pretty hollow. Like, I don't even know what I stand for. So that's what I'm doing.
I mean, but dude, awareness be like most, not half of the battle. You see what I'm saying?
Totally.
Yeah.
And so, good old courage. Good old courage. Because here's the thing about courage, dude, it only comes after you do the thing that's scary. It's so counterintuitive. I don't know why the universe set it up that way, but courage only comes after you do the thing that's scary. Knowing that about courage is the way to have it. It's the way to have it. And then what happens is you become comfortable in the unknown. You want to have courage? Take an improv class. That's woo! Just like to practice it, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you don't realize how valuable it is, but the reason why the knee just kept bending to power was because people were unpracticed at courage. It was a muscle that had atrophied. People hadn't done it for for younger folks, and I tell especially the like smartphone generation, one of the things I tell kids is if you see a fight going on, don't film it, dude. Find a way to either intervene or get help, because that makes you an accomplice. We have to, right? My man realized, yo, I can't be an accomplice in the world that I don't want, right? There's two kinds of courage: battle courage, moral courage. Sometimes one is linked to the other, but there's people who can knock you out, and kick ass and take names, but can't say the right thing to the people who need to hear it. That's moral courage, right? And we need both at this moment, but mostly moral courage. And that's how we get the world that we want. And these things that seem like rough, dark occurrences won't turn into blessings in disguise without it. We actually are the ones we've been waiting for. So it's super uncomfortable, but it is what it is. And we wouldn't be able to have this had these good folks at the Human Universal Health Institute not giving us this space. Can we give them a round of applause real quick? So value-added human interactions are sometimes financial. So, like, if you can donate something to these good folks to keep this space with this energy going, please do. Because, like, we need your work, sis. Like, we need your work. Where you at?
Yeah.
We need your work. And we need spaces like this, and we need conversations like this. I wish more folks, I invited the hell out of them from the, like, you know, other side of this equation would show up today. But you know who they are. They in your house. They're going to be at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And so remember cohesion and remember courage and move every day like that and just let it unfold. You know what I'm saying? So now we're going to socialize.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Oh, no.
Hold on.
Real
2
quick,
moments.
I'd love to hear from the note takers.
Note takers. Oh, shoot.
What you saw, what you felt, what your takeaway is.
You got the time for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you say we got time, then that means we have time.
Let's see what they said, what they got
Yeah.
out of that. This will be interesting to see how the listening went on two sides.
Right.
Well, my notes are more like a, you know, meeting minutes.
That's cool.
Because it's gonna take me a while to rock it all and process it all and integrate it all. But this is a part of a conversation that I really, really would like to be part of going forward. I've been lurking in the conversation because frankly, I have friends who I think a lot of and who I think a lot of me, but who get really nasty around this subject. And I need to find a way to engage them in a way that's productive and healing. Yeah, human, yes. Healing, yes, thank you. So I just wrote down quotes and what I could remember of what Theo was saying and what I could remember of what some of the comments from the group were. So there's not a lot of me in here yet. I'm happy to do that at some point. Beth was gonna help me with this.
Yeah, I really appreciate being here. It always fills me up to be able to be with people because I am the odd one out in my life, big time, in my family, everywhere, except for my husband Jim. But I was hoping, and I mean, who shows up is who shows up.
So who shows up?
I was hoping to have more
counterpoint.
Yeah, more counterpoint, more conversation with the other side.
So are we.
Yeah, just
We
to
really tried.
Yeah, no. Yeah, just to be able to get there, because for me, where I'm standing, I feel that the divide has just gotten deeper and wider. With Bobby's, I understand why Bobby took the action that he took, but from within my world, everybody, they cannot hear anything that he says now, because now he's a bad guy. And so it just has created even more turmoil, you know, in my
I've seen
personal
that.
life.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and just knowing how to converse with people, and even honestly, if I can get behind it, because I'm not behind the rest of it. So, right.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Oh, I struggled with that one, being in the campaign and all. Woo!
I'm sure.
Woo-wee.
Theo, is it possible to be fully behind the HHS and not at all behind any of the rest of it?
Yes.
I mean, it's happening in my brain, but what I want to know is it practical?
I think that you have to look at how long a thing will last. That's the most important factor for me. Will a Bobby program outlast a Trump program? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's the game that I'm trying to game out in my mind. Bobby knows how I feel about him as a person. You know, I got nothing but love for him because I know what he's been through.
Right.
You know, I told him I couldn't follow him into Trump world. And that really ended a lot of relationships I had within the campaign that are his top brass. So how do I extract myself from the world of the man? I got to know the man, right? Bobby is the dude, and I'm not really in that world anymore. So I lost relationships because of that, but I still have a way in if I absolutely need it. But my thing is do no harm and try to do the right thing. When I was in Hyannisport, I made a decision right there on Bobby's couch. Following my integrity got me here. And if following my integrity gets me out of here, I'm following my integrity.
That's right.
The results be damned. And that's how I play this. Trump's president, it is what it is. What's happening is happening. It's out of my control. Right? This is my community. And I'm doing the best I can here. And if something that I want to do that I think will outlast this presidency, that aligns with what Bobby's trying to do, connects, then you'll probably see me in his world again. You know what I mean?
Nice.
What
did you notice?
Boy, I just want to say, just writing down people's stories and sharing, I felt like I was processing the last 5 years in a way that I haven't processed. Because I didn't realize, I think Phil and I have talked a lot about how just alone we felt in where we stood, especially amongst so many of our liberal family and friends, with the exception of a few people. And just to hear what happened to people in the last 5 years, it's like, oh yeah, I had that with my mom too. I was the only one who would stay with her, and the rest of my family was afraid of her. And I mean, there's just so many of those. It just helped me feel not alone in what I went through, and also feeling like, okay, so now we need to move on. And what does that look like? Forgiveness, compassion, letting go of the anger that I feel for how I lost half of my business, and never saw half of my clients ever again. Just, there was so much sharing here that really touched me so much, and it felt, and being in person with people too.
How about that?
I felt this was just so touching, and it feels like we are onto something here. And I've been hearing about the process of this evening through Phil and him coming home from meetings and talking about, and I just really had a little fear about it. And actually, Beth, I had a fear of it being combative with pro-vaxxers, and I was a little bit like, I don't know if I'm up for that. But I feel like I'm coming away with something way different than I expected, and almost like a way forward to approach people who our pro-vaxxers, to talk with them how to go forth. So, yeah.
So what do y'all think? Should we do this again?
Yeah.
I want to say just one thing, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
It's on the topic of people and courage and being in proximity and what it feels like to just open and speak. You know, I had a lot of fear. I started putting this out and I had people going, "Oh, you're one of those." And I was like, yeah, I'm one of those that wants to put people back in the room, get people off your computer, and start discussing in like a really heartfelt way. And the whole time I've sat here, my heart is just like, because I wasn't afraid of the pro or the anti voice. I just wanted to bring all voices to the table, whatever they had to say. And the amazing thing is how many people we invited. I could show you the list of people that we invited to say, please bring the other perspective to the table.
So did I.
And so did you, and so did Phil. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because these are the voices that needed to be heard. This is the energy that needed to be birthed to initiate something for more of this, because this is just the first one. My vision, and I hold clear that I want to do 12 more of these, and I want to keep rolling out topics, rolling out conversations. And I'll just introduce one of them.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's no fair that Christ has become politicized. It did not need to go either left or right or in or out or you are a this or you are a that. It's like, wait a second. So it started with vaccines, whether it's Wi-Fi or 5G, it's like reclaiming the sovereignty of faith, whatever our faith is. So I want to see a depoliticizing, a deconstructing of political moves and this return to humanity. Like, looking at all of you, I wish I had more food and drinks. I'd love to just stay and celebrate. But I just thank you for coming out of your house and joining and being part of something that is just beginning.
Yeah.
It's just beginning.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.